Hi everyone, it's Suzanne Jones with Love and Pieces. Thanks for coming back to my channel. I want to share with you some crochet projects that I've just finished up. These are actually a custom request from my nephew. He had a few products that he wanted for work and just for his own use that he wasn't able to find exactly what he wanted on the market. And so he asked me if I could help him come up with something. So I'm very proud of them. These are his design. This is what he wanted, specific and custom to his needs, his size. Everything was measured on him. And then we worked, and I would make up something and check it and see if this was what he would want or what he wanted, and we'd either take it out or keep going. I mean, there's several different iterations of these projects, but this is what we landed on. So I just wanted to share with you kind of the thought process of how we went from his thoughts, his ideas, to these actual products. I want to say first, I do not know how to read a crochet pattern. I watch YouTube videos. I might could figure out a pattern if I tried, but for the most part, my mother taught me to crochet, and it was basically just handing me a hook and some yarn and, helping me figure out how to crochet stockings for Christmas or something like that. So I don't have a lot of experience in the actual pattern work, but I do have some experience in just picking up some yarn and making it into something. And that's what these are. This video is probably not for the novice crocheter. While all the stitches and everything that's done in these projects are very basic, it's not the easiest way of doing them. There's some math and some calculations and just some understanding of how things are going to connect and move together that come with knowing how the yarn works. So I'll share with you the tips and things I learned along the way, our methodology for creating these, but I don't have a pattern to share with you. I'll just share my notes and help you if you want to make something like these. I will say there are a lot of videos out there for similar products, but again, the things that are out there weren't exactly what he was looking for. He wanted to be more custom, more specific about certain aspects. So I couldn't even just watch a YouTube video and follow it. I kind of had to just wing it. But let's kind of go through this and show you what we came up with. I did take some notes. If y'all have not, if you're a crocheter of any level, if you don't have a project notebook, I encourage you to get one. This is a great way just to keep up with the projects that you make, that you enjoy, that you want to remake, or kind of like this, lessons learned as you went. So I have all of my notes from these 4 projects for him. I've got his measurements and kind of instructions and tips and things if he wants to either have me redo any of these with modifications or just recreate them because, they were spot on. But the first thing I want to show is probably the easiest, and this is called a gator. And I wasn't familiar with that term until he shared it with me. This is basically just a long tube that you slide on over your head, and it can gather around your neck and keep your neck, your chin. You can even pull it up onto your mouth and nose, up over your eyes if you wanted to. This was something that he was looking for. And actually, he was looking for it, and then I just picked it up and kind of started making one, and we actually clarified it in a later project. So I'll show you that as well. If you go to my shorts, you will see him modeling all of these projects except for one, and you'll see kind of how it works. But this is, if you're a hunter or you know someone who is, you might be familiar with that term, gator. And this simply was kind of a fortuitous mistake. And let me see if I can get this laid out here. For those of you who have been on my channel before, I'm on the couch recovering from knee replacement surgery. Well, I'm doing great. Everything's fine. I'm recovered. I'm getting around really well. I'm not back in my craft room because actually over a month ago now, we had a pipe burst during a freezing spell. And so everything in our house is just literally upheavaled. The entire back third of the house has now moved into the living room. This is actually my bed in the living room. I'm on my couch. My project's on the bed. And the moving company is coming this week to move us out into a rental for a couple months while they finish up the repairs. The pipes and everything are taken care of, but now we start the repairs on the walls and getting out the mold and the mildew and redoing the floors and all of that wonderful stuff. I've never been through this before, and it's so much more than you ever think of. So like I said, we're waiting on the movers to come move us out in just the next few days. And I do plan on taking some of the stuff from my craft room, but I won't be able to pack it up and take it with me. So, you'll kind of still see this hodgepodge video from me for a while, but that's me. That's what my channel is going to be like. Let's just assume that. So anyway, back to the gator. The top part of this where I started, this is my chain stitch. We wanted it looser. I started off with it looser. And so I think I chained, let me make sure on this, I chained 85. And we were kind of going for what felt comfortable on him. This turned out to be 85, and I don't have my measurement on it. I'll get that inches in just a second. And then I just went from that chain stitch and I started doing a double crochet. This is a 4-weight, medium weight yarn. I believe it is, I love this yarn. It's from Hobby Lobby. And it took 2 skeins, maybe a skein and a half, because I think the original skein I had wasn't quite full. But it took, basically we would have done 2 skeins. I just stopped with, the skein plus what I had, which was about a little over a half. And we just made it as long as we could. Now, this was with a 5.5-inch hook on, again, the 4-weight medium yarn. That's a bigger hook than it called for. And with the double crochet, I got a really nice, open, stretchy weave to this. And so it works really well. Like I said, go check out the shorts to see how he wears it. But he can slip this on over his head. It can hang down around his neck to kind of fill the gap between his coat, his shirt, his hat, those types of things while he's out in the cold. But then easily slips down or pulls off when he goes indoors or doesn't need it on anymore. So just an additional layer. With his job, he's out in the cold a lot, and so he's looking for custom pieces to help keep him warm. A fortuitous mistake with this one, because I was doing a circular join, which means I did a row of double crochet, and then I joined it and I chained up and did another row of double crochet, joined it, chained up. In that process, I actually was losing a stitch every row. I wasn't getting back, somehow I wasn't getting my stitches right. And so it started funneling. The bottom part was bigger and it just kind of started to curve in. And when we realized it, he said, that's kind of cool. It makes the bottom bigger so that it can pull up over his head, the back of his head. So we kind of just kept going with that pattern of dropping a stitch every row to decrease. And then when we got to about 50 stitches in a row, that was about as small as he wanted it. That fit his face really good. It kind of hung snugly on his nose and around the top of his ears and fit really well. So the bottom half leveled off at no decreases and just 50 stitches per row. And then as he's worn it, it's stretched out a little bit more. So you can kind of see this is where it's stretched out. But again, go back to those shorts and see how he wears it. I think this would be a great piece for hunters, for anyone who works outdoors. If you spend a lot of time out, maybe snowboarding or skiing or something, you might want this kind of warmth. We're in the South. We don't get a lot of really, really cold days, but I could see this beneficial for people who spent a lot of time outdoors, even in moderately cold temperatures. So that's the gator. The second piece that he asked for was similar to what other people will call fingerless gloves, but he calls these glove liners. What he wanted was something small enough around, kind of the knuckle part, not that went up to the full extent of his knuckles, but just kind of held on his thumb a little bit so they wouldn't come off. That's what this little part is. You can see it would lay like that. Just hung on his thumb and up on his knuckles enough to keep it from sliding off, but that he could wear underneath his work gloves, because most of his work gloves are leather, and they don't come up high on your wrist. So he would have this gap between his gloves, and then like if he stretched out his arms, his his coat sleeve or his shirt sleeve might leave a little bit of a gap between his gloves that exposed his arm. And so he wanted this piece to fill in that gap, to go from inside of his gloves to well underneath his shirt sleeve. And he does work outside. He works with his hands a lot, so he wanted a really stiff, solid weave that wouldn't get caught on things, that would not be an open knit like a lot of products, and again, not as high up on his knuckles as to interfere with the gloves, the fingers of the gloves that he would have on. So this is what we came up with. Again, this is custom to his measurements. We measured around his, kind of the palm of his hand, above his thumb where he wanted it. For him, it was 9 inches. And then we measured about 1 inch that he wanted it on his thumb. That felt good to hold it on there, but didn't interfere with the thumb hole of the glove. This was kind of a tricky part. How are we going to maneuver past his thumb? And what I figured out was we did I did 5 rows here, and then we opened up for his thumb hole, and I simply just stopped that stitch. I used a double crochet at the very end of that row and then chained 12, but I attached it at stitch number 10. So this part has like 2 extra stitches in it to help it fit over that bulkier part of the lower thumb and still fit tight up above in the crease of the thumb. And so that's how I did that one, and then joined it back in, like I said, chained 12, but joined it at stitch 10 with a double crochet to kind of give it a little bit more stretch. It almost looks like it goes across several rows, but it was just one row that I left open, and then just continued in a circular crochet motion all the way around. This is a single crochet stitch. I went through both loops, front and back loops. No, I take that back. On this one, I only went through the back loop. So this is a single crochet through the back loop to give a little bit of stretch, but not a lot. And it's done in what we call a continuous, or I call it a corkscrew pattern. You chain, and when you join it, you don't like take a step up. You just keep chaining all the way, or stitching all the way around. So you're basically just going in a continuous circle, a corkscrew. And I like that because I didn't have to count. Once I got my chain measured, and then I measured him again when I got these 5 rows, and it still was fitting and everything was good, I could just follow that continuous pattern and not really have to count. Just be careful that you don't drop or add a stitch in the way. And again, this is a single crochet in the back loop. Any other things? Let me think. We measured how far up he wanted it to go on his arm, and I believe that wound up being 9 inches as well. Yeah, these were easy to remember. It was a 9-inch circumference over his palm, 9 inches long from the bottom of the thumb opening. So this is 9 inches. And then this top part is 9 inches as well, because he wanted it fairly snug up on his arm so that it wouldn't pull down with his sleeve or move with his other sleeve, or kind of, he wanted this fairly snug to fit. And this is what fit with him. He has used it several days out here, kind of working around. He's been staying with us, helping us with the burst pipe situation. So you can see this is kind of form-fitted to fit the shape of his hand. And that kind of stretched and gave in different places, and it kind of naturally tightened up in his wrist because it was stretching a little bit more in other places. So it looks like I did some kind of decrease here. I don't know if you can tell that, kind of a decrease in this part, but I did not. This is simply a continuous crochet, and that started with 37 of my chains gave me that 9-inch circumference that he needed, and this stayed 37 all the way down. It just has stretched out as he's worn it a little bit. So there is that one. I did use the 5.5. No. Sorry. I got to go back to my notes. I used the 3 hook for this one. And again, this is still that 4 medium weight yarn. So that needle was smaller than recommended. And you can tell the difference. When you use a bigger needle, you're going to get that bigger open weave. That's what I did on that double crochet. And this was a needle size smaller, half a size or a full size smaller than the yarn called for. And so you get this really nice tight weave. And you know, these look pretty good on. I keep saying it. Go look at the shorts and you'll see him wearing them. And I'm very proud of them. And I think he is too. I think he's going to get a lot of use out of them. So that was his glove liners. Again, some people might try to call them fingerless gloves, but they don't come up as high as a true fingerless glove. And they're tighter than that. They're meant to be a tighter weave that's, you know, kind of safe for him on the job site, but then also comfortable enough and tight enough to fit underneath his actual work gloves. The next one, and this one blew my mind. When he said, "Can you make me a hat?" I almost said, "No, I don't think I can." But, you know, you love your nephew and you say, "Yes, I'll try to figure out anything for you." He drew out kind of a pattern, and, you know, he said he wanted a brimmed hat. He wanted it to sit up tall. He kind of wanted this ridge with a flat top. It's a really good looking hat. It takes on a whole new personality when he slips it on than it does just laying here. We got to where we were calling this the Pringle shape. So in front, he puts it on, and this just kind of naturally wants to lay flatter, and these sides just naturally want to give a nice little curl. Really, really good looking hat. I don't know if you would call it a fedora or a bowler. I don't know the names of hats. And again, this was his custom piece because he couldn't find anything that he liked in the store. You know, he had some ideas of other hats that he's got that he wanted to kind of put together, and he couldn't find them in the store. So this one actually started with what I call the band. Again, I don't know the technical names. I chose to do an amigurumi stitch with this. And if you're not familiar with that, a typical basic crochet is yarn under for both parts of the stitch. This, an amigurumi stitch, no, I said that backwards. This video is going to be a lot of corrections as I go. A basic crochet stitch is yarn over for both parts of the stitch. An amigurumi stitch is yarn under for both parts of the stitch. And what it does, it creates kind of like this little X, if you can see it. This is, amigurumi is the Japanese term for crocheting like characters, little small, like animals or teddy bears or that kind of thing. So that's where that stitch name gets its name is from the Japanese amigurumi. And it's a tighter stitch. It pulls tighter. It keeps a tighter fabric. So you can't hardly see any of my needle holes in there. You can't see, my fingers are on the inside. You can't see through that. The amigurumi stitch is a lot more body, a lot more stiffness. And I think the X gives the yarn a different shine. If you are a cross stitcher, you know that when the way you cross your floss in cross stitch gives the floss a different look. This mimics that with that X, and it really does give a nice look out in the sun, out in natural lighting. And in fact, you can see here, this is the amigurumi stitch, which is yarn under. And you can even see right here, I think I got a row in where I got distracted and did not yarn under, or only yarned under for half of it. So you can see the difference in the stitches. There's the good traditional X, and then there's a couple rows of I don't know what I was doing. I got distracted. But luckily he forgave me. He was very happy with it. He said that just makes it more custom, that it's not exactly perfect. So the band of the hat, this is where I started. This is actually the chain stitch. And I chained 85. I chained it to be a 1/2 inch smaller than his head circumference. So his head measured at 22, and so I chained this to be 21.5, because as you crochet into your chain, it's going to expand it a little bit. Plus, we wanted this to be able to like kind of stretch and fit on his head and not be too tight or too loose. So kind of sit right where he wants it. And this band part was going to be cylindrical, so straight up and down. So whatever I started with was the goal to end with. And so whatever the head measurement is that you're aiming for, chain as many as you need to get, I would say, a half an inch shorter than that. And then from there, I just did the same thing as I did on the gloves. I did what's called that continuous circle, or I call it a corkscrew. I connected my chain, and instead of stepping up to start my row, I just continued moving onto my chain and started the amigurumi stitch. And this is, as I said, amigurumi through both loops, so it's nice and tight. And I just kept corkscrewing or continuously circling around until I had this stands 3.5 inches tall. And so that's what he wanted, was for it to stand about 3.5 inches tall. I think originally we were going for 4, but once he kind of got it on his head and was trying it, it was a little too tall, so we took it down to 3.5. You could make this as tall as someone wanted it, as long as you've measured where the hat will hit them, hit their forehead or hit their head. That's your measurement, and you can go as tall or as long as you want to get that straight, almost stovepipe hat. Changes a little bit when you put the coin in it or whatever this top part is. How I moved from the band out to the brim, I continued my same amigurumi stitch, but when I got to the bottom, as far as we wanted the band to be tall, I went around and I slip stitched on the outside of the band all the way around. And that was to give it a kind of like a solid stopping point, so that I had a kind of a 90-degree turn happening here. So I slip stitched all the way around. And then when I got back to the beginning, I did not chain up. I kept my corkscrew method, and I just continued on doing the amigurumi stitch into the slip stitch that was on the hat. So what that created underneath is kind of this little slight ridge. Not much at all. It's comfortable. It's not, I didn't want something that would be rough against his forehead. So that's the that's the slip stitch and how it turned. And you can see here, that's kind of the corkscrew join that I was talking about. You don't step up, you just basically come off of the stitch onto a slip stitch. And then when I got back around, I just started, probably it was going the other direction the way I'm looking at it. It just started spiraling off onto the rest of the stitches. If that helps you make sense of that instruction. And that's just where I had to weave in my end at the end when I was done. So again, amigurumi stitch all the way down in a continuous stitch, continuous spiral. When I got it as tall as it needed to be, I did a slip stitch on the outside, and then came back around and then started my amigurumi stitch onto the slip stitch, and went 2 rounds without increasing or decreasing. Left it just as, however many stitches there was. One of those rounds is what kind of turned under here to make this edge, and the other one is just very slightly visible right in the crease of this point. Now, if I had just kept going with that same number of stitches, the hat band would not have laid flat. It would have turned up on itself. It would have gone back into a cylinder. So to get it to lay flat, I started increasing. And so my next 2 rows, let me look at this and make sure. Yes, the next 2 rows, so slip stitch, amigurumi stitch to attach it, and that's in the same, I did 2 rows of the same number. And then my next 2 rows, which would be rows 3 and 4 of the brim, those I did with an increased stitch every other stitch. So single amigurumi, then 2 amigurumi, then 1 I guess I should say 1 instead of single. 1 amigurumi, 2 amigurumi in the same stitch. 1 amigurumi, then 2 in the same stitch. This is where I'm saying it's probably not, this is not the best way for a novice crocheter to start, because I'm not doing justice in how to explain it. But That's what I did, was I increased every other stitch for 2 rows. And then by that point, I was out far enough that it was laying flat, and I just kept going with my corkscrew after that. And I kept watching. If it started to curl on me, I was gonna, you know, I was gonna do an increased stitch again, or an increased row again. But it continued to lay flat after those 2 rows of increases, and just let it go. I felt like it was about to start turning on me, and that's when he said, "Nope, that's a good size brim. That's as far as I want it to go anyway." And so I didn't have to worry about that. But that's how we got the brim to kind of make that 90-degree turn and come out. And then I did try slip stitching on this edge to try to finish it off, but it took away this nice body, this nice personality that the edge has. It made it lay flat all the way around. It turned it almost into what I'd call a Jed Clampett hat, if anyone knows that reference. It never would pick up its little curl, and this wouldn't kind of go down like it does when he wears it. It just basically flattened the whole thing out and took out its personality. So I wound up not doing anything on this outside edge to finish it. It's just, you know, the last row of stitches, and then I stopped and wove in my end. Now for the top, and this was what was the hardest of it. We made 4 or 5 different, I don't know what you call this, crowns, coins, you know, the centerpiece. We made 4 or 5 different ones, trying to get the shape right and trying to get it to lay completely flat. And we ended up going with a complete spiral. We tried a circle spiral. We tried kind of doing an oval. We tried doing more of like a rectangle-ish to square it up a little bit. But what looks the best on him, on his head, and what shapes more to his head is this true circle. Everything else, it was like the hat tried to hold its own shape instead of forming to his head. So, and I think he's got a perfect little head. I don't think it's square or anything, but the round just allowed the hat to form itself to him. So these, again, amigurumi stitches, I started with a magic circle in the center and joined it. And there was 6 stitches in my magic circle. So if you've ever done circular crochet, like for doilies or anything like that, and you're trying to, you know, make something lay flat, there's a sequence that you follow to crochet in the round and it lay flat. And as I said that, I think I said I did this in the corkscrew, but I didn't. I don't think I did. I think that was messing me up. I ended up doing the magic circle with 6 stitches. Then your first row after that, you do 2 crochets in each stitch. And so I did 2 amigurumi stitches in each stitch, which gave me a row of 12. Then the next row, you do 1 amigurumi and then 2 amigurumi in the next stitch. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And then the next row you do 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. And then the next row it's 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2. Basically what you're doing is every row you're increasing the same number that was in your original circle. So every row increases by 6, and the pattern of how you increase moves those 6 around the circle so that it lays flatter. Now, there's several different YouTube videos. I would encourage you to go out there and look for them. Some of the patterns that I've seen, if you follow that same 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, eventually what happens is all of your additions start landing in the same spot, and it almost turns it into a hexagon instead of a square. So what I've done to combat that, it's what I've always heard, on my odd number of rows, I do my increase stitch in the middle of them. On my even number of rows, I do my increase stitch at the end of them. So what that looks like is row 1 is your magic circle with 6. Row 2 is you're increasing in every stitch. Row 3, you're an odd number, so you do 1 stitch, then your 2 increases, your 2 stitches to increase, then 1. So 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. Then your next row, which is 4, an even number, you're going to do your increased stitches at the end. So it's 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2. Know that's sounding like gibberish. If you're not familiar with those kinds of increases, again, this is why it's not a true novice project. All of the stitches are very, very basic. It's some of the techniques that are a little bit more complicated if you've never tried them. So go look up video tutorials on how to do a flat circle. You'll see the ones that if you go very large, they start to look hexagon. You'll see other people giving you tips of how to adjust so that you get more of a flat circle. And now that I've got all these projects done, I may come back and do one on what I've always done. I actually haven't seen a YouTube video about with the technique I use of the alternating rows. So I'll come back and try to do a tutorial for that in the next week or so. But once I got the rows done, I just kind of kept measuring. One, I was placing it in inside the band to see if I had it big enough. We didn't want it to pucker. We didn't want it to sag. When it's on his head, it lays very flat. The sides kind of stand out a little bit more and, pull it up a little bit. You don't have as drastic of a trough here around the edge. So just kind of watching it to see how big I needed it. I actually wound up going to 19 rows, which made this a 3.5 inch, is that radius? So it was just short of a 7-inch diameter. It was closer to 6. Maybe I may have to double check my measurement on that, because I really do think it was a 3-inch radius with a 6-inch diameter. But in either way, it was 19 rows by my stitches. And rows don't give you actual measurement if you're trying to go for a fitted piece like this. So you need to kind of know your measurements. How I got that measurement, I did measure the circumference of my band to see what I was aiming for, and it was a little off. It wasn't exactly the same circumference as this, so you can kind of see there's a little bit of a pucker here and there, but it disappears a lot when it's on his head, and as he said, it's going to get wear and tear. That's not going to be noticeable once the hat stops being kind of fresh. It's going to get worn, it's going to get crumpled up. That was one of his requests for this style of hat. He wanted something that was brimmed and had structure to it, but he wanted something that he could wad up and throw in his pocket. Like if he's on a job site, he could throw it into his pocket, but if he needed to go into the office, he's actually an insurance adjuster. If he needed to go into the office or run into the bank or talk to a client, then he could take it out, fluff it up, and have, a respectable looking hat, but something that kind of went from job site to, as professional as he needs to be with his clients and everything. So that was it. It has no other boning or structure in it at all. The most structured part of it is here where the top coin joins the band, and I just slip stitched that together. So I don't think I said that. I just put, basically it was wrong sides together if you're used to sewing. I just laid the coin in here and brought it up to the edge of the band, and then just slip stitched on the inside all the way around. And then I did take my tail back down through and into the inside to weave it in. But that was the hat. This definitely took the longest. The hardest piece of all of this was figuring this part out. The other hardest piece, or the most complicated, was getting the measurements right. Where did he want it to sit on his head? How tall did he want it? What did that equate into stitches and rows? Getting the band the right width for him. But all in all, I'm very proud of it. I think he is too. And like I said, looks really good on. Looks very nice for a very first attempt. Now, the last thing I did, because we had done the first gator in black, and he really likes this kind of a neutral gray, he wanted a gator to match his hat and gloves. And as we talked about it, he liked the black one because it was open and he would be able to kind of wear it in some different ways. I think he used the word baklava for something that you can kind of pull up over your face and pull back over your head. I'm not familiar with all these terms, but he wanted something else underneath it that he could use. So we kind of thought we're calling this a gator, and this looks a little bit more traditional. It's stiffer than what a true gator is, I think, but this looks a little bit more traditional to a gator. We're kind of calling this his gator liner, because he's thinking that when he's really out in the cold for hours at a time, he wants something thicker that might go underneath a gator, or underneath a face mask, or underneath his collars and other parts of his, outerwear that he might have on underneath his coat. And this one, again, was custom fitted to him for the width at the top and bottom. And this is just a single crochet. I didn't do the amigurumi because we didn't want this quite as tight. I wanted him to be able to breathe in it. So this is a single crochet. You can see my finger, the shadow of my finger moving in there. It's still the same 4-weight medium yarn. I used the 5.5 needle on it, and I did go through both loops. So, and you can tell after I did the hat for so long, I was kind of when my mind wandered or I wasn't paying attention, I slipped back into my amigurumi stitch. So there's some of the X's. But then when I'd catch myself, I'd try to undo them, but apparently I missed a spot here, several rows here. This is a traditional crochet, and you should be able to see kind of a V. I struggle sometimes to see it, but like right there, that's a V. That's what you get from a traditional single crochet stitch, is a V instead of the X. And going back and forth from standard to amigurumi, I probably perverted several of these stitches. I don't know that any of them may really be true, except for the X's amigurumi. So yeah, this was just measuring it. It's very nice and tight. You can see it standing up. I just finished this one tonight. It's a little after 10 p.m. I literally just finished this one. He's leaving tomorrow, and I wanted to make sure I got it done for him. So we don't have any video or pictures of him with it on. I might be able to grab some of those before he leaves tomorrow. We'll try to do that and make shorts out of them as well. But this is just a nice stiff gaiter per his request that will fit underneath some of his other outerwear, help keep him warm. And so this one was, I chained 75, which was a 22-inch circumference. That's the same circumference of his hat. So basically, this could come up on his face right underneath his hat. So, if his hat was on and he was really out in the cold or the wind was blowing, he could pull this right up to almost the brim of his hat. And so that's why the measurement's the same. And then just very simply, I did the same kind of chaining and then corkscrew for that continuous row. And I did, it says 70 rows. I didn't quite get there. I finished off one skein of yarn, and the skein that I was working with for this, there was like 211 yards in a skein. If I had more, I think he would like it longer. But again, time and material restraint, I basically stopped at I think this is 50 rows, but it was one entire skein that I just worked up as long as it would go. And again, just regular double crochet in both loops to make it a nice stiff piece. So there are the 4 custom crochet pieces for my nephew. Love my nephew. He does wonderful stuff for us around the house. He takes care of his aunt and uncle. We are so grateful for him. And then so happy that I could make something or help him. Just a little kind of funny. The first couple nights he was here, we were just sitting around and catching up and visiting and talking. And he said very sweetly to me, he said, Aunt Suzanne, do you think you could teach me to crochet? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. And then I almost knocked him down running to my craft room to grab the yarn and everything. So I actually set him up with yarn and a set of needles and a crochet box and got him started. He's working on his own orange hunting gator in the hunter orange, learning the single crochet, but he's doing it in the back loop only to give it a little bit more stretch. So he's actually kind of learning to crochet himself when he's not out doing everything else. So anyway, I was very proud that he wanted to learn, but then also proud I could whip these up for him and make his designs come to life. He kept saying, how amazing he thought the work was, and I said, no, that's the work's the easy part, designing it and knowing what he wanted and being able to say, I want this, I want a ridge, I want it flat, I want it tight. Designing the product to me was the impressive part. So thank you for hanging out with our video. Again, if you've not seen the shorts with him wearing these, go check them out. And they are in my shorts video. They're my first shorts and only shorts at this moment. And if he comes back and wants any modifications to them for a next round or a version 2.0, I'll be sure and share that with you as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you do something creative. And as always, be nice to people. Bye.